So 2020 was a crazy year, but it is what it is. And if you're watching this, that can be only one thing, that you survived. All the pandemic madness affecting the world, the presidential craziness, the demand for justice, we survived it all, and hopefully we're better for it. To get the year started off right, I decided to review a few movies that I stumbled across for 2019 and 2020. And let's get started with the movie I probably anticipated the most, the movie Tenet. All right, so when I first saw the trailer, I didn't learn much about the movie. I remember seeing some kind of tricky gun scene or something, but I didn't really care. I knew it was directed by Christopher Nolan. And this was enough for me to be interested because Christopher Nolan is the great one. And he brought classics like Memento and the true Batman. No, not that one. No, not that one. Yes, that one. So this dude announced a new movie, and pandemic be damned, I had to watch it in theaters. So when the time came, I grabbed my popcorn, I grabbed my drink, I sat down, and became utterly confused. But I don't mean that lost TV feeling where you're lost for a minute, like a freaking polar bear stuck in the forest, only to get that warm, fuzzy feeling when everything eventually is explained. Oh no. And if you're a Lost fan right now shaking your head, don't give me that look. The polar bear thing was explained. Watch it again. Yes, all 6 seasons. So I had the honor of this beloved storyteller confusing the heck out of me, only fully prepared to give him a standing ovation at the end from the sheer brilliance of it all. So when I started watching the movie Tenet, I began viewing it with the knowing smirk on my face, fully prepared to dissect every little cinematic clue Christopher Nolan would dangle in front of my face. However, at the end, the smile faded, and I learned the film was no Inception. Regardless of the valiant effort, the movie was completely over my freaking head. So there's a version where things go backwards, and you need to learn the art of catching the bullet instead of shooting. And it's a movie where the end of a friendship is actually the beginning of one, and the concept of death is in the eyes of the beholder. I only watched the movie once, and Nolan has a tendency to make you watch a movie multiple times before you fully grasp the concept. With that being said, being confused actually wasn't the thing that annoyed me. And it isn't the reason why I probably wouldn't rewatch it. No, actually the reason why is because it was so darn boring to me. I think Inception was a masterpiece, and after the first time watching it, I couldn't explain half of what I saw. But I loved it, and I wanted more. Fighting bad guys from the ceiling and crashing into them with some zero gravity action, watching the complexities of the human brain that can hold such great possibilities while being unable to let go of the greatest sorrows that would plague you. Beautiful. And instead of the ending being a definitive conclusion, it became a talking point and a conversation piece for years. However, with Tenet, my awesome action scene was replaced with fighting backwards. Although I started off wondering what that would be like, I quickly learned why such scenes aren't in most action movies. It's boring as heck. Imagine you're about to watch a great fighting match that you would give 3 mortgage payments to see. I'm talking like Muhammad Ali pre-Foreman versus Mike Tyson pre-stand-up comedy and biting and Buster Douglas. I mean, these two titans going at it in perfect health and with unstoppable grind to be the best. In this corner, we have Muhammad Ali. And in this corner, we have Mike Tyson fighting backwards. even if the novelty appeals to you for a minute or two, eventually you're going to say, okay, now go ahead, fight for real. Let's get serious. That's what I was thinking the entire movie. Okay, seriously, fight normally, do normal action stuff. And I don't mean normal as in the same generic, predictable stuff. I mean, this is Christopher Nolan after all. But I mean, still just going forward and killing bad guys and blowing stuff up. Not doing side missions where other people are busy killing bad guys and blowing stuff up. Well, crap. Can I watch that movie instead? With a heavy heart, I will give this movie a 6 out of 10. I usually would try to explain how to fix a movie under 7, but this is hard since this is Christopher freaking Nolan. I mean, the easy answer is to say, make it less confusing, but it just makes me feel like his response would be, it's not my fault that I'm better and smarter than you. And why don't you sit in that corner and put a dunce hat on? I would say though, that he could have incorporated better action sequences within the boundaries of the world that he was showing. So once again, I would say Inception was a much better movie, but not from my understanding of the concepts. Besides having the King of Bears himself, the movie also contained scenes that left me wanting more. So Tenet, I think, is something along the line of like a badass car chase scene where the past has to catch up with the present. Like, our hero comes across a scene where everything is disseminated. I mean, piled up cars, bodies strewn, helicopter crashed. And he needs to pick up his currently dead friend and put him on the recently crashed helicopter. If he can get away with it, both will be very much alive as they fly backwards out of harm's way. Or another idea could be all the bad guys lining up all the good guys in the firing squad. Then the final good guy races to each bad guy in the firing line and move their bodies slightly to the place in the path of the bullet. So as the bullet goes backwards to go back inside the gun, it reaches the bad guy's body first and they die. Admittedly, these scenes may get you just as confused as the original, but I promise you walk away saying, I don't know how, I'm not exactly sure what happened, but that movie was badass. Okay, so the next movie I want to talk about is Soul. It's about this music teacher who essentially dies living an unfulfilled life. How true to life is that for many people, right? But right before he bid it, he was presented a golden opportunity that could change everything for him. And if that was truly the work of the big man, then that would be the definition of him having a sense of humor. The only thing that the teacher had to do was pass on, but the man was hell-bent, pun intended, on getting back to Earth and his body to take advantage of this golden opportunity. I thought this movie was exceptionally great, but in truth, I think that Pixar's body of work is top-notch to begin with. So instead of thinking, oh, let's check this out, this might be a good one, I felt more like,
do your job.
This probably isn't a good thing for me because the higher I put them on a pedestal, the greater I set myself up to be disappointed by them. And this fall may be harder than Nolan Gate since they have hits on top of hits. I mean, they gave us Wall-E for God's sake. I think the movie Soul contained some great and talented actors, and the roles that they played were fitting. I especially love how the talented actor/musician Jamie Foxx played the role of the aspiring musician, while the funny, goofy, and lovable Tina Fey played the role of the funny, goofy, lovable sidekick. Jamie Foxx's character Joe is trying everything in his power to get back to Earth and have the performance of his dreams, while Tina Fey's character 22 has no problem giving the assist, knowing that she can stay where she is and not have to worry about any of that pesky living stuff. I love how both characters grow and appreciate themselves in life in ways they couldn't have imagined before, but more importantly, I love the things and the messages not said. On Joe's death day, he was stoked to be finally part of a legendary band and perform in a packed house. So it made me think, how many people have things in their lives that they want to accomplish or places they want to travel to, and they keep holding it off? Even that guy or girl that you want to talk to. You see them every day and you keep trying and trying to build up the courage to talk to them. Many people die with unfulfilled lives and wasted potential, waiting for a day that never comes. I think that a lot of people think that they have more time than they actually do until one day, without warning, they fall into a manhole. I also like how the movie shows how wonderful life is. In order to qualify to get to Earth, you would essentially need something called the spark, which is, in a sense, exactly what it says, a spark. You would need the spark of life to give you enough interest to make it in a world that is guaranteed to give you hurt and pain. The spark allows you to look past that and recognize want and desire in their purest forms. Without the spark, one could see life as a pit of despair and negativity, and it only makes more sense that the spark is a prerequisite to making it to Earth and living a life. I love how 22 transforms our outlook and desire while also showing how outside forces can greatly harm or help you. I rate this movie a red hot 10 out of 10, which is rare. All right, so now I'm moving on to Wonder Woman 2. Unlike Tenet or Soul, I wasn't really expecting that much. I mean, how do I put this nicely? DC is no Marvel when it comes to movies. Now, TV shows, they do fine. With animated straight to DVD / Blu-ray movies, they do great. When it comes to blockbuster movies, they fall short. And I swear try their best attempt to ruin my childhood in the process. Personally, I don't understand. I mean, look at Batman v Superman. They were literally given decades of storyline connecting Batman and Superman together. My personal favorite is the animated movie Batman and Superman Public Enemies. I think the movie was made right at a real US economic crisis, housing if I'm not mistaken, which made the movie a little bit more true to life. Well, Lex Luthor became the president and the masses allowed it to happen. It cracked me up because I think it's also true to life, where it doesn't matter what you're on record of saying or doing, but if you have legit solutions to make American lives better, then we'll let it pass. This is what happened on Public Enemies. Lex Luthor had solutions and everyone gave him a pass for all of his misdeeds. Well, everyone except for Superman. Superman stuck with the notion that Lex was on some shady stuff, and in the end he was right, as he was framed by Lex. Lex dished out some fake news which made Superman look like a killer, as he passionately looked into the camera and said, "I have no choice but put the bounty out on Superman." Almost everyone lined up to take him down or turn him in, and Superman was left with no ally in the world except for Batman. Now that to me sounds like a blockbuster movie, not this "take care of Martha, why'd you say that name" crap. Ugh. Anyway, my point is DC had a long-standing history of massively disappointing me in the box office. Green Lantern, anyone? So when the first Wonder Woman movie came out, I had my doubts. And although I didn't think it was a great movie, I thought it was decent enough, especially for DC. In my mind, the only great DC films were Man of Steel and Batman trilogy. But don't worry, DC, I don't think Marvel is as great as people make them out to be either, but more on that later. So with all that said, with the first Wonder Woman movie being I wasn't exactly losing sleep on seeing the sequel, but I was bored, it was streaming, what the heck. And what the heck, indeed. This movie was so weak. Even not expecting much, there are still things that I would expect from any major superhero movie. Like, I don't know, how about an actual superhero story with an actual superhero? This movie was a glorified love story. First off, this guy that she hooked up with back in the day graduated to the ultimate love of her life. It reminds me of like a high school freshman that found her first boyfriend. And she thinks that he's the love of her life and he's the orbit of her universe and they will be together forever, and she grows up. She realizes that this dude that she knew for like a week was very brave and very cute and very caring, and oh crap, there's like thousands of them. And in love high school freshman, if you're watching this, sorry kid, the dude probably isn't as awesome as you fantasize him to be. And if you just had a bad breakup, then I see your future. More loves and more breakups will come. Such is life. I also see that this will happen within the span of your teenage years. Skills. So you're telling me that Princess Diana, with their cute confidence and established self, couldn't find one other dude like her dead beau in the past 40 years? 40 years? No one? Okay, fine. There's a magical rock, she wishes him back, and I get to see their great love continue to blossom throughout most of the movie. And I'm not anti-love stories. I love love. I love the passion of Titanic. I love how William Wallace wanted a simple life with his lady and how he went on a frenzy when they took that away from him. I love how this innocent, non-talking little robot fell in love with this robot destroyer and dedicated to protect her at all costs. I love love, and you can have love in a superhero movie. All I'm saying is don't forget about the actual superhero stuff to go with it. I mean, how long was she Wonder Woman in the movie? 30 some minutes? And what was she doing as Wonder Woman? I mean, I get this cheesy intro of these guys stealing from a mall. Phew, the world is safe on that one. And in the end, we get to see her ultimate power as a superhero. The power of getting people to change their minds. Yay. It reminds me of a skit for Saturday Night Live where they made fun of Black Widow before the actual Black Widow trailer was made. They talked about how they would never make a woman superhero movie because they didn't know how. That's how I felt this movie was. It's about love and female empowerment and getting confidence and friendship. All important factors as long as it's coupled with her kicking someone's ass. Wonder Woman, with all her power, whose ass does she actually kick? I don't want to give away too much, God forbid, but just think about every main enemy in the movie and how they were ultimately defeated. Ugh. I give this movie a 5 out of 10. So how do we fix it? Give me action, darn it. Give me a foe like Zod was in The Man of Steel or Bane was in The Dark Knight Rises. Unwilling to compromise, well beyond rehabilitation. They just are who they are and they need to be stopped. Or, like my man Alfred said,
some men just want to watch the world burn.
Also, kill the whole returning of a loved one angle. Dude is dead. He died in the 40s. Let him stay dead. If you really want to play the whole dead loved one angle, I would recommend finding a bad guy like Mysterio in Spider-Man or Forge in X-Men. And I can't think of any DC ones at the moment. But someone who has the ability to shapeshift and change their appearance. The person would be a bad guy and devoted to screwing with her. Another example would be the Highlander series where the bad guys got a woman, gave her plastic surgery to make her look like Duncan MacLeod's dearly departed Tessa. He was drawn to her in a heartbeat, but it was all a setup. I think it would have been kind of cool to have small cameos like a 10-year-old or 15-year-old or whatever-year-old Bruce Wayne. He's a moody kid and finds some way to help her in something. They could also show a young Barry Allen impressed on how fast something or someone is before he gets his powers. Hell, they could even show a young, arrogant Lex Luthor, president of a student body. I mean, you take your pick. All right, since we're just talking about superheroes, I guess I'll move on to one of the highest grossing movies of all time. The movie that I feel I was legit brainwashed to see. Of course, we're talking about the Avengers Endgame. Now I'm going to give you a spoiler alert. I'm not as nearly as crazy about Endgame or the entire Marvel franchise as a lot of people are. Like I said before, I love me a great superhero movie, and although most Marvel movies are at least decent, there are only a few that reach the level of greatness. Let's see, to count them all, I would say Captain America Winter Soldier, Captain America Civil War, Avengers Infinity Wars, and that's about it. I know, but what about, okay, let's talk about it. I get how Marvel movies are action-packed and there's a lot of fighting, and I paid to see action, so what more could I want? Those elements make a decent movie, but I look for other things to quantify greatness, like shocker and actual storyline. Or how about a reason for fighting? Don't be a lazy writer to just toss together elements for the convenience of the story. Endgame did that a couple times, which drove me crazy. But with all of your writers and decades of storyline, create an actual story. Before I get to Avengers Endgame, let's quickly go over the Avengers movies as a whole. But before I do, let me preface, I don't think that any of the movies suck. Not at all. However, I think many of them were lacking and were only decent. In other words, something to sit and watch for a couple hours and kill time. Not to be compelled or inspired like any superhero movie has the potential to do. I mean, the type of movie where you walk out the theater daring anyone to try you because you just graduated from an accelerated class of whoop-ass. The kind of movie where you need to see those flashing lights and hear that whoop whoop for you to chill the heck out again. So let's start with the Avengers movie that started them all. The plan was simple. There was already a series of individual superhero movies at this point. So now we have to bring them all together, assemble them, and show them that they are a force to be reckoned with. I mean, just like my man said in part 2.
Can we hold them?
The Avengers.
So the movie is a go, and we have Thor with the hammer, Hulk with the strength, Iron Man with the suit, Hawkeye with the bow and arrow, and Black Widow with the gun. All right, they're all finally together to stop the ultimate threat. The ultimate threat of Loki. Loki. Oh, not just Loki? I'm sorry. Loki and his henchmen that I bet most of you don't remember what they are called. Why? Because they're extras. Filler to see the awesomeness of the Avengers. And don't get me wrong, I'm all about that. But here's a crazy idea. Why not give them an actual legit threat besides Loki and the henchmen? Think about it. You have a wide range of Marvel villains to choose from, and you're creating a new storyline anyway, so just choose one. Any of them. At least give Loki a legit partnership if he's forced to fight the whole of the Avengers. I mean, how many times did Loki get beat up in the same movie? At this point, I actually felt bad for the dude. I felt like it was an anti-bullying campaign, and I watched them gang up on poor little Loki. Not one friend? You couldn't give the dude one legit friend from all of the storylines? Shameful. So then we move to Avengers 2, Age of Boredom. I mean Ultron. It seems like they were more focused on punchlines, and admittedly, there were some good ones.
Find the scepter.
And for gosh sake, watch your language.
That's not going away anytime soon.
But Jane's better.
But all I'm asking for is a better storyline. For example, Scarlet Witch. We had to sit and watch as she went from person to person and put them in a dream state. For what purpose? So we could see Black Widow in ballet class? Or Captain America at a party? Why? So I thought about this many times, and the solution is so obvious to me. Imagine if, instead of Scarlet Witch going around playing with people's minds for no real purpose, she only had one game-changing purpose in mind. Get to the Hulk and play with his mind. And what does he see? All of his friends, the Avengers, as Ultrons. That alone would have graduated the movie to legendary status. Also, it would help explain the ending better why Bruce was so quick to leave Earth. Because he almost killed everyone, to include Scarlett Johansson's final self. Then we move on to Avengers 3 Infinity Wars. My friends, families, frenemies, trolls, I got nothing. This is what I call a great movie. Random action scenes didn't happen for the purpose of having action present. There was a motive. There was a cause and effect. The villain wasn't just a generic villain. I can't stand stories where the villain is maniacal for the purpose of just being maniacal. My dude Thanos was calculated and a true warrior. He pretty much shanked Iron Man, told him good try, and he hopes that people will remember him. and darn near apologizes to Gamora for chucking her off a mountain. In other words, you see him as a villain, but he has no problem rationalizing and philosophizing as he beats you down. Then Marvel, those freaking marketing geniuses, made the move that essentially brainwashed me to watch Endgame. And at the end of the cinematic masterpiece, the bad guys win. The bad guys win. Thor is left with his axe and a fighting tip. Iron Man is left licking his wounds and surrounded by a cloud of dust. The Avengers lose. So now, just like everyone else, I sat with anticipation for the conclusion of this saga to be released. Movie theaters were showing the movie back to back, and I still sat elbow to elbow in my seat, ready to watch it. And then, I'm utterly disappointed. I'm convinced that many people are more brainwashed with movies than I'll ever be. For anyone that loved the movie, my question to you is, why? I'll give you this. Endgame had a strong, compelling start. Hawkeye's family knocking on Thanos' door, asking for a cup of sugar. Yes, awesome. And of course, the ending, yes, a thing of beauty. Playing football with the gauntlet, the women's movement, the last man standing, Thanos still being a badass. Loved it. But everything else in between, what the heck was that? I felt like I was listening to an album or watching a TV show compilation labeled The Best Of. This is the best of the Avengers. Oh, remember back in Avengers 1 where you enjoyed that New York scene? Now you can relive it again, but a softer, more cuddly Hulk. Did you miss the interaction and love shown with Thor's dead mom? Well, no worries, you can see it again. Why would I want to rewatch scenes for a brand new movie? Yes, I understand that they actually weren't re-showing clips, but they were scenes that weren't too important for the overall plot. Cap versus Cap? Great. Stark bonds with his dad? Great. In the meantime, the minutes of the actual movie just keep ticking away. I would have loved if they made the whole going back thing one big montage. The whole thing takes like 5 minutes of the movie, and then they are free to create, I don't know, a new storyline. Hell, just find another villain who is Team Thanos and likes things the way they are. I mean, seriously, take your pick. It's not hard. Oh, and one thing that royally pisses me off is the convenient storyline. So let me get this straight. Everyone was randomly paired up to grab a stone. And it just so happens that Hawkeye and Black Widow went to the one place where one of them had to die because they cared for each other the most or some crap. My question is, what if any other pair, was sent to that Soul Stone place? Or what if that initial pair up didn't involve them two? What would have happened to the getting rid of the one you cherish the most thing? That is what I call convenient. The random conditions are the situations that are lined up perfectly for this one thing to take place. Also, let's say if Black Widow is destined to die. Okay, cool. Then why can't she die on a battlefield where it could be a more spectacular fashion than whee? Like I said before, we have the ending, which of course is awesome. But if the beginning and ending of a movie are the only things that are great, then it makes the movie overall pretty weak. So I give the Avengers 1 a 7, Part 2 a 7, Part 3 a 9, and Part 4 a 6. I'll finish covering all the superhero movies by talking about the movie Brightburn. The only thing is, this movie is far from a superhero movie. Brightburn essentially tells the story of Superman if everything went wrong for humanity. A simple family discovers a spaceship, baby inside, they hide the spaceship and blah, 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 blah. But this time, the little alien boy doesn't adopt the modest, hardworking family mentalities. Like Clark Kent, the boy quickly realizes that he is different and physically superior, and it goes straight to his narcissistic head. Instead of coming to the conclusion that he needs to protect everyone, he concludes that he is essentially better than everyone and no one can stop him. This boy also reminds me of a kid version of Homelander from the series The Boys. Just like The Boys, I think the movie is unique and a breath of fresh air from the typical, predictable superhero movie type. This movie was far from predictable, as all of the normal rules went out the window from the jump. It continued to keep me intrigued throughout the movie and all the way to the end. I will rate this movie an 8 out of 10. John Wick 3. Oh, John Wick 3. So growing up, I used to love fighting games like Double Dragon and Streets of Rage. And I found out recently that they made Streets of Rage 4. Out of sheer habit, I was seconds away from buying it on the spot. Just because I'm reminded of simpler times of beat 'em up action. I could sit there for hours punishing the bad guys that coincidentally look exactly the same. John Wick reminds me of those times. Now, they couldn't get away with doing CGI and making the same person over and over again, but they sure can get away with a plot simple yet compelling at its core, and the scores and scores of people that are about to suffer by the hands of John Wick. Honestly, the simplicity of the story is what helps make it an amazing movie. Boy meets girl, boy goes through hell to get girl, boy gets girl in the end. He has plans to live happily ever after, but the greatest practical joker had other plans for her. She dies, and John Wick has no one to blame or take vengeance on. I mean, maybe if he knew the Winchester brothers.
It's very unseemly, making deals with devils. How do I know this isn't just another trick?
It's no trick. I will give you the Colt and the bullet. But you gotta help Dean. You gotta bring him back.
The only thing he had left in his miserable world were his car and his dog. But this wasn't just any dog. This dog was the last thing given by his lovely departed. This dog was his anchor when he was on the brink of the deepest depression. This dog brought back peace and tranquility in life. And thugs broke in and killed that dog. It's amazing storytelling when the bad guys were yelling things out like, "It's just a dog." From the outside, you can see their point, not contemplating the connection and source of his real anger, which can't be extinguished. I honestly didn't have high hopes for the first one, and I was pleasantly surprised. By the second one, I had my doubts that they could recapture that bottled up lightning, but I was wrong. By the third film, I accepted that this movie, although simple at its core, worked. I went in excited to see John Wick 3, and just like the first two, I was happy that I did. I personally love the two Asian dudes that paid homage to the great John Wick in the middle of a fight. What really had me going was the same thing they did for John Wick 2. Leave me wanting more. Now, I'm not saying that they do it on the same level as those Marvel marketing geniuses or the Resident Evil series. No, they do it in a more subtle fashion, but effective nonetheless. Every fiber in my being says, okay, the story should be over. He got his revenge 3 times over. He could go back to retirement and live his best life. But the inner kid in me screams, more. Give me more. For the John Wick series, I rate 1 and 2 an 8 and part 3 a 7. I mean, don't get me wrong. I think John Wick 3 is a good, solid movie, but it's just not as iconic as its predecessors. For example, I love the idea of the Halle Berry temporary partnership, but I'm not a big fan of her dog being killed and now she wants revenge angle, because we already saw that. And I'm not a huge fan of her saying that the bad dude would go berserk and would try to kill her only for the bad guy to go berserk and try to kill her. I mean, once again, I'm not saying I hated it, but only that there could have been a better way. Here's my proposal. Halle Berry pleading her case that it's a suicide mission, and John Wick not wanting to be a complete dick, lets her repay her debt by helping from afar and somehow staying out of harm's way. In that city, John Wick relies on a couple of other people besides her but most of them turn out to be traitors and willing to turn him in a heartbeat. She finds out, she's forced to jump in when his back is against the wall, and a temporary partnership is still formed. Climax. I have to be honest with you, I don't know what the heck I saw in this strange film. I do give credit for originality. The movie is anything if not unpredictable. It starts off with the interviewer asking about their passion to dance and the love of music. One by one, they give their answers and share their dance or die attitudes. They are all assembled to shoot a music video, I think in a warehouse. The group does their dance, finish, and celebrate with a party. Then someone spikes the punch with some type of hallucinogen, and all hell breaks loose. Dudes turn into rapists, protective brothers turn into not so much protective, caring mothers makes horrible life choices, and someone ends up dead. I rate this 1 to 5. Here's my input. It's a movie, so let's connect the storyline. Make the character's backstory compelling, and if someone ends up dead, then show a character with homicidal tendencies or something. Show me something. I actually do get points for originality, but let's not be so unique that we forget to actually complete a legit story. Richard Jewell is the only movie I'm going to talk about today that's based on a true story. It centers around the 2000 Olympics in Atlanta. There was a bomb attack at a concert during the Summer Olympics that apparently I was too young or self-absorbed to even realize. But I think the movie gave a solid representation of what I missed. Apparently there was also this guy named Richard Jewell. He had nothing to do with the bombing, and this wasn't a mystery movie, so this was made obvious from the jump. However, he was an overzealous wannabe cop and acted a little off in contrast to the average American person. This throughout the movie made Richard Jewell suspect number 1. The truth is that people were hurt and pissed off. In those situations, the desire is strong to punish someone and put them away so they can learn their lessons and never have an opportunity to repeat their offense. But unfortunately for Richard Jewell, leads were slim and law enforcement latched on to whatever they could find. He was the one to find a suspicious package and raise the alarm. When others tried to brush it off, he refused to let it go, making sure that people evacuated the area and saving lives in the process. For probably the first time in his adult life, he was veered as a hero. He couldn't barely contain himself as stations lined up to interview him and continue his fame. But as real leads dried up, the tables quickly turned on him. In an instant, the respected hero transformed into the number 1 suspect, and all of his weird quirks betrayed any appearance of looking innocent. I personally love this movie. The actor that plays Richard gives off this innocent, childlike vibe when he kept defending the same people that were trying to build a case against him. My heart felt for him when he kept saying, "I'm law enforcement too, so I get it." They tried to play him like a complete moron as they kept giving his ego a much needed boost. Like explaining things, cop to cop, or having him come to the station to do a training video only for him to sign his real rights away. The dude went from a proud, starstruck man able to show his mom how he finally made it to the number 1 suspect hounded by every news agency to tell the truth. I will rate this movie an 8 without anything to approve on, especially since this is based on a true story. I must say on a side note, I'm always leery when studios use based on a true story or based on actual events. I mean, in the end, what exactly does that mean? How much of the story is factual? Technically, you could say that Reservoir Dogs was based on a true story because some dudes robbed the bank before. Or The Matrix was based on a true story because there was an office worker that went to work and hated his job. The thing is, there's no established line that says that X amount of the story needs to be factual. Don't get me wrong, I'm not talking about Richard Jewell in particular. In fact, there are too many witnesses still alive for the story to be too made up. But I mean true life stories in general. Next up is Bill and Ted Face the Music. Let me start off by saying that I was extremely hesitant to watch this movie. I'm convinced that Hollywood is on a mission to kill my childhood, and they won't stop until they succeed. Ask the makers of Dumb and Dumber 2 or Transformers Last Night or Dragon Ball Evolution. Ugh. With that said, I'm terrified to watch Coming to America 2 and even more scared to watch Matrix 4, just like I was scared to watch this movie. I wasn't the biggest fan of Bogus Journey, but Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure was a classic. I even just rewatched it a couple months ago to see if it stands the test of time for entertainment, and it does. If you don't believe me, rewatch the mall scene or Napoleon Water Park scene and try not to laugh once. If not, I might just have to send you to the
Iron Maiden. Iron Maiden? Excellent! Execute them. Bogus.
So watching the surely had to be stoners but no evidence to prove it teenagers is one thing. But to watch two middle-aged men with kids, wives, and responsibilities didn't seem to have the same flair. But as much as I wanted to just ignore the movie completely, I couldn't ignore that whisper asking what the heck is the storyline and what in the world is the actual song like. You know, the song that gave the duo their free pass to time travel and the event that gave them their first beer without being carded. So my curiosity trumped my fears and I watched the movie. Honestly, I'm happy I did. The movie wasn't nearly as bad as I thought. Over 20 years later, they still have no song and the world was coming to an end. I must admit, the logic behind that never made much sense to me, but based on the silliness of the movie, I had no problem letting it slide, just like the random trash can falling on Ted's dad's head on the first movie. They used the phone booth 2.0 to go into the future and find a version of themselves where they made the song and they didn't suck as human beings. Those interactions weren't too bad, and I thought we were onto something, but the movie eventually fell off in the end. I think I was okay with that because at this point, at least the movie performed better than I expected. I mean, the movie went straight to streaming, so I treated it as such. However, there was one thing that is unforgivable. The song that we waited a cinematic eternity to listen to completely sucked. The whole premise of the entire freaking franchise is two friends band together to make a song that saves the world, and they have the luxury of a time machine. So here's a crazy idea. Round up together musical icons from different eras and make one awesome song. It's only right. Not to mention, they were already on the right track. They had Jimi Hendrix, Louis Armstrong, and Steve Grohl from the Foo Fighters even made a cameo. Round together a few more artists and make a song on the level of Justin Timberlake's Can't Stop the Feeling, which is made for a movie, or Happy by Pharrell Williams. I'm sure somebody like Timbaland or Dr. Dre would love the challenge. It would have been a We Are the World for 2020, but no. All I got in the end was essentially noise. So thanks for saving the world, Bill and Ted. I give this movie a 6, but in defense, I was suspecting much lower. So there's that. 1917. 1917. What a superb movie. In fact, I think it was one of the greatest movies of the year for sure. I mean, the story is so simple and yet so powerful. It was during World War I, and the British were fighting the Germans. The general summons a young private and explains how there's a whole British unit a few hundred miles away that's about to walk into an ambush. Hundreds of British soldiers will surely die if no one warns them. Oh, and by the way, the private's older brother is part of that unit as well. So the private grabs his buddy and take on the insane task of going through the enemy lines to save lives. Then stuff happens. That's all I need to say on this, but excellent film. I'll give this a 9. Next up is Creed 2. First off, let me say, well done, Rocky franchise. You managed to breathe life into the franchise while still keeping my childhood completely intact. I appreciate you. Instead of conjuring some random BS storyline, and thank God not letting old man Rocky Balboa fight again way past his prime like they did in a self-titled film, They found a way to make an actual believable storyline in Creed. Out of all the Rocky movies, in my mind, there is one that stands out above the rest, and surprisingly enough for me, it's not the first one. I think the most iconic Rocky film is, and will always be, Rocky IV. After all that grudge matching and making up, Rocky and Apollo Creed are best friends, and Apollo decided to come out of retirement. Of course, no comeback match is official without the infamous James Brown performing a new song. The only problem is that the match itself was against Drago, the boxing Terminator. And even James Brown's Living in America song couldn't stop this American from the ultimate beatdown and his untimely death. Way to turn it up, Rocky franchise. Like I said, best in the series. Rocky vows for vengeance, ultimately gets the revenge, the respect, and blah, 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 blah. We thought that was the end of the Creed saga until Creed, the movie, was released. I think it was a good movie for what it was, but honestly, it's a boxing movie. And I only could think of a handful that were actually great, like Cinderella Man. Mwah. However, the movie was good for what it was. After now watching Creed 2, I can actually say it wasn't as good as the original as a storyline. Not horrible, but nothing to rave about either. However, they did make one huge noteworthy move. They brought back Drago. I love the whole scene where he comes to Rocky's shop and essentially is like, you know what this is about. Drago presents a vision of his son versus Rocky's pseudo-nephew, and the grudge continues. Like I said, not a great movie, but brilliantly done. Plus, Michael B. Jordan is the young Creed, and that dude can act his butt off. So, also well done. Overall, I will rate this movie a 7. Judy. Judy was a movie about Judy Garland, or better known as Dorothy from Wizard of Oz. Side note, I read that she was the lowest paid actor/actress in the film, although she was the main character in the movie. Even paid lower than Toto the dog. And that's code. Well, the movie has very little to do with her as a child and her growing pains, but she obviously had some because the story centered around her train wreck tendencies as an adult. Low on funds, she agreed to do a tour in London where the masses still loved her. But no money or luxury could fix her issues, and they came out in a big way. I think it was an interesting film because it tells a story that I'm sure happens all the time, but we rarely talk about. When you're hot in the entertainment industry, people want to know all about you and where you're up to, but the moment you fall off, things get a little different. In Judy, you get a taste of that fallen from grace, but didn't get the memo story, which is compelling. I will give this movie a 7. Queen and Slim. Queen and Slim had a great premise, but I think it fell short in the end. The story is about a black guy and girl on a date, and the guy on his way to drop her off. He gets stopped by a white cop, one thing leads to another, and he shoots the cop in self-defense. They automatically go on the run because they knew the idea of any civilian shooting a cop for any reason is a hard sell at the very least. I like the concept, but I think it fell short on the human interactions. This all starts with the cop himself. They showed him rude and hostile, but he ended up dead. What they should have done was transform the cop into a monster. Not literally, but figuratively. I think he should have either been one of those 1950s cops, blatantly racist by calling him boy or commenting on the car that he probably stole, or have him give off some of those rapey vibes to the girl. Either way, the average viewer would start thinking, well, I guess it wouldn't be so bad if he had an accident. Then when they go on the run, they could show a news clip of the same cop. He had numerous reports filed against him from civilians, or maybe he was currently under investigation for some heinous crime or something. That would help explain the movement that they inadvertently started, and as a viewer, I would be more into it. I think the same goes to the two main characters. I could learn more about them in their hopes and dreams and show how the last thing they ever wanted to do was have any problems. That would have made the storyline more compelling, and the situation would have felt more like the killing was ordained by karma. I would rate this movie a 6. Terminator Dark Fate. Terminator 2 is one of the greatest action movies of all time and is hands down the greatest Terminator movie ever. I don't think none of the follow-up Terminator movies measured up, but I don't think none of them did anything drastic or completely horrible to ruin the franchise either. Well, that was until Terminator Genesis a couple years ago. They finally managed to do it. They tinkered with the storyline so bad that they ruined the darn franchise. They made John Connor, the dude that was so important that they tried to kill him as a baby in part 1, as a teen in part 2 and 3, and as an adult in part 4. The guy who was the leader of the resistance and was going to make all these big things happen was transformed into a freaking Terminator. So the good guys had to kill John Connor. This to me was such a stupid concept and a slap in the face for all of the hard work in the previous movies. I mean, what are we doing here? So last year, they came up with the latest installment of the Terminator movies by making Terminator Dark Fate. The first order of business was for a new Terminator to go back in time to kill teenage John Connor, and I was okay with it. See, if Genesis didn't exist, I might have been upset about the whole situation, but the truth is, they already ruined it for me, and they already ruined the entire story arc anyway. So I saw the killing of John Connor as a public apology and a way to restart a new storyline arc. And you know what? I accept your apology. So seeing the movie with a new lens, the movie wasn't too bad. I seriously think that they need to come up with a conclusion where humans triumph and that's the end of it. Going back and forward in time in a storyline gives you the ability to do and undo a deed. But if there is no actual vision at the end, then it just becomes a yo-yo effect and it can last forever. This is what happened with John Connor. Instead of simply concluding the story with John kicking back, drinking from a Terminator skull or something, they muddied the waters too much. If they continue any Terminator series, my hope is that they learn from their past mistakes and they have a vision to give an actual conclusion. Probably not. Anyway, I give this movie a 7. So those are all the movies I have now for my review. So what do you think? What do you agree on or disagree with? Feel free to put it in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe to the page. Also, don't forget, it's all just my opinion. Whatever, don't take it too personally. With that said, I hope you like and subscribe to the page and sit back, relax, and watch a movie or something. I don't know. Have a good one.